Regional Council Ordinary Meeting for June 2021. Do we have any apologies? No apologies. Could I ask everyone to be upstanding, please? I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And while everyone is standing, I'd like to pass a mark of respect and a minute's silence for those residents who have passed away during the previous month. Thank you. Please be seated. Councillors, I'd like to move a procedural motion to set aside the standing orders to bring the mayoral minute forward so that it's the next item. So could I have a vote on those in favour of moving the mayoral minute to the next item? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, you would all know by now that the Tablelands Regional Council went through a recruitment process to recruit a new CEO, and I'm very pleased to say that Gary Reinhart was the identified candidate and has been selected by council, but we need to formally appoint Gary today. So could I'll move the motion that we can see up on the screen there, that council appoints Gary Reinhart to CEO of the Tablelands Regional Council. So could I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cardew seconding. Those in favour? Thank you very much. Carried unanimously. Look, I'll take the opportunity to just say a few words about Gary, and then Gary may say a few words in response. Gary is a focused leader with a strong background in driving organisations forward by continually improving operational efficiency and effectively managing change. He has a comprehensive understanding of local government financial and operational management, gained through 20+ years experience in local government executive roles. Prior to joining TRC, Gary has operated as CEO of 4 local governments, where he established a reputation for providing strong governance and leadership and delivering quality community infrastructure projects using best practice project management and effective stakeholder engagement. Gary also has outstanding commercial acumen gained through 10+ years working in senior finance and commercial roles on large-scale projects within the construction and resources sector. His private sector experience has refined his project management expertise and increased his understanding of productivity, measurement and management. When Gary is not an avid When Gary is not working, he is an avid follower of rugby league. Unfortunately, he supports the Broncos, and also enjoys kayaking when the opportunity arises. Gary is married to Sally, and they are both looking forward to being part of the Tablelands community in the years ahead. Congratulations, Gary, and welcome.
Thanks,
Gary, if you'd like to say some words.
It's a privilege to be here. Thanks very much to Council for the faith you've shown in me. Hopefully that will be repaid over the next few years, and I'm really looking forward to it. Looking forward to Sally getting up here and joining us. I guess for us, we're kind of a package deal. She knows a lot about a lot of stuff too, has a great interest in tourism, so we'll be active in the community outside of work as well. Unfortunately at the moment she's locked in Wollongong and not allowed to go anywhere, but we'll just have to see how that all plays out over the next few weeks. But you can go places, but you certainly can't come to Queensland again. So, but yeah, we're very much looking forward to getting up here and getting settled in, and do thank the Council again for the confidence shown in me, and looking forward to what lies ahead of us very much. And I guess as of yesterday, my other career choice is gone. It seems the Broncos thought Ben Icon's application was better than mine. Systematically ignoring my suggestions as to how to improve anyway. So we'll move on and stay here, Mr. Mayor, with you guys.
It's their loss. Okay.
Exactly.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. Now, I'd like to move another procedural motion, councillors, just to reinstate the standing orders so that we return to the order of business. So I move that we reinstate the standing orders. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, item number 6. Do we have any declarations of any material personal interest, conflicts of interest by councillors or senior council officers? Councillor Billman?
Through the Mayor, in accordance with section 150 EQ 4A of the Local Government Act 2009, I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 12.4, being the trade services extension. My stepson is Bronson Dusu, who operates Big Days Plumbing and Civil Contracting, as well as Atherton Location Services is noted on the list of suppliers. I therefore intend to leave the meeting whilst the matter is discussed and voted upon.
Thanks, Councillor Billman. Any other councillors or staff with conflicts? Okay, look, I'd like to declare that for item 12.1, Barron Catchment Care Memorandum of Understanding and Financial Contribution, I'll be leaving the meeting for both the discussion and the vote on that particular one, as I'm a former employee of Barron Catchment Care a couple of years ago. I'll be leaving the room for 12.1. Thank you. All right. Item 7, confirmation of minutes. Do we have a mover for the minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor Clifton, and a seconder. Councillor Wills. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 8, business arising. Business arising, actions out of the minutes of the previous meeting. And Jackie's got some business arising up there on the screen.
I don't have an answer for that as yet.
Would that be one in your area, Mark? That one?
So it seems from the board, through the chair, it seems from the board that was allocated to the general manager for community and customer service. However, I think it's a combined effort. Information needs to come from several parts of the organisation.
Yeah.
And if I could just comment, yes, so that is the case. It is actually a combined activity. Yeah. It is being worked on at the moment to pull that information together.
Okay.
If I,
Yes, Councillor Clifton.
my reason for asking that was we did take a month ago at the last meeting, we did take a fairly significant decision with respect to the Herberton kindergarten. In the absence of knowing what the cost to the ratepayers of the regional council are, and I think it's really important that we know that as soon as you can't take decisions without having that kind of information available to us. So I would urge that it be done. It is a month now. We urge that it be get it as soon as we can.
Thanks. It will be. Thanks, Councillor Clifton. Thank you. Okay. There being no further business arising. Item 9, Deputations and Delegations. So we have John Wilkinson and Terry Clark here today from the Atherton International Club, and they're representing the club, but they're also representing those sporting and other clubs that operate out of the International Club. So John and Terry, if you'd like to come up and sit at the end of the table here, and I think you've got some information that you want to pass around.
Yeah, okay.
Might do that first.
What we have is our letter requesting the rates be dropped on the water charges for the fields. Attaches a letter from Jimmy Chapman from when he was chairman, when the fields were built. A letter from the soccer, both junior and senior, saying the support we give them. And there's also a letter from the touch football, which is also attached for senior and junior. We also have regional finals here through the schools from time to time that are using our fields for touch. If I could let you read those first, and then we can
Beautiful, thank you.
continue.
Yeah, okay, Terry. We'll just take a few minutes, huh, to scan through these. Okay, I think councillors probably have had enough time to go through those. So we might go back to you, Terry and John, if you'd like to. You can stay seated, Terry. You don't need to. Thank you.
Look, we've put a lot of work into these fields. At the cost, we absorb all the costs on them at this stage, just to do something for the community, which is what we'd like to do. But going back to when the fields were built many years ago, I'd like to pass over to John to speak about that, because it was John who was dealing with our Mayor, Jim, at the time, and this plan came forward.
Well, the fields were actually built sometime before we even dreamt about putting water on there. It was in Jimmy's tenure that we started putting water on it, because we were playing on dirt, actually. We came to an arrangement. The soccer club, I was president of the soccer club, and I was on and off the International Club Committee. We were looking for some ground. It was suggested that we go near the sewerage there. The council had some land near the sewerage. Then it was a bit too expensive to build at the time. for the council, oh well, for the soccer club as well. But so there was a bit of, we supply the fields, we do the maintenance on it, and there was an agreement that if we took the water off the end of the fire hydrant, that there'd be no charge to put water on the field, so they're up to a standard that the kids could play on, because before that they'd run on them, they'd get shin splints, they had all sorts of medical problems because the fields were just too hard. We did a lot of work in fertilising, in aerating, which is an ongoing continuous thing and an expense to us. I guess we're here as the International Club, we have a separate water bill. So the water that is used, that we're talking about here, is used by the clubs, not by the International Club, which is a separate meter. The clubs, as you'll see in the letters here, don't have the wherewithal to pay that amount of water as the last bill was. I believe that it was excessive. I think that Mark will attest, we had a bit of an impromptu meeting one day, and I think it was 24 millimetres a day of water that was supposedly put onto the field with this particular bill. That's an impossibility, because the fields would be just a quagmire, with 24 millimetres of water on it. But having said that, that's really another issue, I guess. It was unbeknown to me anyway that there was even meters put on it, and apparently they've been put on it some time, because I've been out of the soccer for a while. There was an agreement with council, and that's probably going back 30 odd years that's been in place, and we've never received a bill, we've never been notified, we've never had a letter to say, well look, we need a meeting, we'll change this agreement. We just ended up with a bill to pay for this to pay for this water, and it's an ongoing thing. I feel that the International Club puts a lot of money forward. We put the fields, we don't ask for rates compensation for the amount of land. We just bought another $30,000 worth of land so that the kids had a little bit more to play soccer on. So we're playing our part, I believe, in supplying this. If the council, I've had some advice, if the council had to supply parking and the soccer fields that we supply, not just soccer but touch, and there's land there for bocce, they're more parking they take up than anything, but if the council had to supply that, you'd be looking at several $1 million. We're not asking for anything except some water that's on a rising main. So as you'll see in there, the sporting clubs are particularly worried that if they go to their parents and say, we want some more money for water, they'll just pull out, which I believe, I've seen it happen before, not for water but for other things. So the International Club charge the soccer club $1 a year, and they charge touch $1 a year. That was just to make a legal document. So I guess it's over to you guys really. I believe that you should honour the agreement that was made, albeit many years ago, for the municipal cost to council. I think there's going to be a huge advantage to the community. So
how many clubs use the field? Sporting groups use the fields?
Touch football, soccer. This is also, you must realise that it's a schools use this as well. Schools use it. Sometimes on a Wednesday when the regional schools come up there, there's not a car park there for our patrons at the International Club, it's just chock-a-block. So
the fields are designed for soccer and touch football.
Well, originally it was designed for soccer and cricket, actually, originally.
What we've got there now is the schools come and play there, plus the junior competitions, North Queensland competition for soccer and touch is played there, both senior and junior. There's about 300 or 400 kids there, people there playing it all anyway, during the year. We've been keeping it water. We don't mind paying the rates. General rates, we're quite happy to pay. It's just something we've never paid before. We pay the water rates for the club, which is, use in the club is 1,370 a year. It was just the water rates in the fields that we've never paid, and we thought that was given to us by the council and it should remain. And, you know, our cost on going $1,500 a month to mow the lawns, to mow the fields, just to do that, and there's weeding and there's detouring banks.
You guys are in Parks and Gardens, you know how much that costs you, so, you know, it's not just to mow the fields, it's all the maintenance on the fields. We supply them toilets, showers, grandstands, their cafeteria, where they can go and sell their hot chips and pies. So the club's, you know, out quite a bit of money. And
So sorry, John, you said touch football and soccer. Were there?
And well, we've got bocce there. There's probably 20 or 30 of them play bocce.
There's some of them, but not a lot.
And then there's some oldies come up there and play, I don't know what they call it, indoor bowls. They put their carpets out and they, but that's in the bocce shed. So yeah, there's a lot of sporting people.
Was there some investigations done recently and a leak found?
Yes, we did find a leak. That was on the downside, I believe, of the fire hydrant. That was repaired. We're monitoring.
And was that leak? Was it evident on the ground?
That's how we found it. When we said flowing out on the ground, we had it fixed. Initially, it was in the gardens. We couldn't see anything.
It's in a low spot, and if it rains, there's water in there, so you sort of don't take that much notice that there's a bit of water there because it's as you come round towards the sporting fields. But
I'd like just ask a question, if you don't mind. Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Come in, officers, if you need me. Is there a meter for the clubhouse?
Yes.
yeah,
And another separate meter?
Which has only been in for 2 years. Never been charged.
this is at the end of nothing to do with the international club. We paid that. That's, you know, we don't have a problem with any of that.
So there's another meter off the hydrant, is there, John?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm assuming that that would have been done some time ago when we changed the water coming from the reservoir back to the International Club?
2 years ago, I believe it was done. Is that correct?
There was actually a meter installed back in 2015.
Yeah.
It was found to be in error. Several years passed before we actually rectified that meter, and that was the meter that was installed in March 2020.
And that's when you got the bill. So that, where the leak was coming from, was it on our side of the hydrant or their side of the hydrant?
I'm not holding.
And when I'm not myself, I'm not completely sure of that.
Okay.
Where it was.
Okay. So I can understand there's a misunderstanding. Well, you've never been billed before, and we put a meter on it, then it was faulty, which can happen, of course, and then you get this huge bill, and I can understand that. So, so I've got that information now. So that's all I'd say at the moment.
Yep.
Council, is any more questions for John or Terry?
Just one. I notice that I'm a great believer in honouring handshakes and traditions. And were either of you gentlemen there with Mayor Chapman as part of the negotiations at that time? Yeah, so you were there at the time when
Absolutely, yeah, it was me that did it.
Yeah, he says the handshake, but I mean, 30 years ago or 20 years ago, handshakes were as good as, well, as a man's word. Yeah, so, okay, you were there. Thanks for that.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you wanted to raise?
No, just that.
Yeah.
We just can't afford to pay.
Yeah,
Where's soccer going to go if we can't afford to do it? That's the
Well,
problem.
soccer touch, there's more touch than what there is soccer, so there's 400 of them in total. That's not counting schools. So there's a lot of arms and legs run around there and utilise the facilities that we are supplying at no cost.
all right, look, we'll take it on notice, and we'll be back in touch.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I know you're busy.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you. See you later, guys.
Thank you. All right, we'll go on to item 11.1. And 11.1 relates to two of our ordinary meetings, one for Memorandum and the other one for Ravenshoe. So basically what happened here at the previous council meeting, we identified dates for meetings in Memorandum, Ravenshoe and Atherton. But what happened, the date we chose for the Memorandum meeting clashed with an event in the Memorandum Pavilion the night before, which was going to delay our setup for the meeting the next morning. So basically, I think we've just swapped the Memorandum date and the Ravenshoe date to avoid that clash with the double booking. So we've got a motion up there on the screen that we amend the dates for both the meeting in Ravenshoe and the meeting in Memorandum. So could we have a mover and a seconder to change those dates? Councillor Wiltz is moving. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cardew is seconding. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. 11.2. This is a document from the FNQ ROC, the development of a strategic waste framework, and the appointment of a councillor to the advisory group. So we've got a motion up there on the board, councillors. Do we have a councillor who would like to nominate to be on this advisory group?
Okay.
Councillors?
I'll make it simple. I'll move that Councillor Clifton be appointed.
Councillor Clifton, would you be happy to accept that?
Thanks, councillor.
So Councillor Hodges is moving that Councillor Clifton be appointed. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Clifton? Thank you, Councillor Cardew. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Clifton. Okay, next item, I have to leave the room. Over to you, Councillor Cardew.
Thanks, Mayor. So, item 12.1, Barron Catchment Care, Memorandum of Understanding and Financial Contribution. Can I have someone move that and second that we open this for discussion? Councillor Bellamy moved and seconded by Councillor Wells. Would anybody like to talk to this? Councillor Bellamy?
No, look, the report is quite encompassing and I think it speaks for itself.
I understand that the memorandum of understanding is exactly the same as the previous one. Is that right?
Through the chair, that is my understanding as well.
Yeah.
It looks exactly the same.
And the financial contribution is similar, except the CPI increase to it, yeah. Okay, if everyone's no further discussion, can I have a move and a second, please? Move by Councillor Wilkes, second Councillor Bellamy. All in favour? Thank you, carried.
Item 12.2, Reef Guardian Council Memorandum of Understanding and Action Plan. Could we have a councillor to move the report to be open for discussion? Councillor Hodge, seconder. Councillor Hayden. Those in favour? Carried. Councillor Hodge.
This is a funny one at the moment, isn't it? I mean, we're just endorsing because we've actually signed up to this, I think, haven't we? By previous.
We've signed up, correct.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just happy to endorse it. I understand the Great Barrier Reef is a bit of a political football at the moment, but I won't go into that. So yeah, just happy to endorse it.
Yeah. Councillor Clifton, did you?
And I was just going to say, if I may, through the chair, the UNESCO have announced, with respect to the Great Barrier Reef, that they haven't visited there since 2012. So you can draw your own conclusions about how topical some of their information may be.
Councillors, any more discussion on this one? Would a councillor like to move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Clifton. I second it. Councillor Wilkes. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. (12.3) Supply and delivery of 2021-2022 bitumen reseal program. Would a councillor like to move the officer's recommendation on this one? Yes. Officer's recommendation. Councillor Hodge is moving the officer's recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Billney. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, it's quite straightforward. Just noting that the price of bitumen has gone up 10%, but as we've been advised, I've clawed that back a bit. So, and I understand bitumen and asphalt is a scarce commodity at the moment. I know, speaking with John Coltswater up there, they've been expecting to get their asphalt now, but it's been put off for a while. So yeah, quite happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Anyone else like to talk to this one? Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried. Thank you. Yes, thanks, Councillor Billney. Item 12.4, Trade Services Extension. Could we have a mover to open report for discussion, please? Councillor Wilkes. Seconder. Councillor Cardew. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Wilkes, would you like to talk to that one?
No, ask Chris to respond to the...
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Chris?
Through the media, just like a bit of an overview.
Yes, thanks, Chris.
So, Council run a pre-qualified tender for the supply of a few items throughout Council. This one's related to trade services, everything from electrical works to hydrovacking to a number of different services. There's a large list of the currently pre-qualified companies at the back of this report. The recommendation here is to extend the current contract for a further 12 months to allow the pre-qualified arrangement to continue. Essentially, the main mechanism for pre-qualified is that the compliance checks is done for officers before any purchasing arrangements take place. So critical things like insurance, qualifications, contact numbers, really basic information to ensure that people we're engaging under a pre-qual are qualified in their relevant areas. So it's essentially what the contract's for. You'll probably note that there's no rates attached. So previous to this council, we used to have rates. However, from a contract administration, they necessarily weren't being administrated correctly. So you could ring up and get a price, and that price, unless you were matching it up every single time with the contract rates, wasn't proving efficient. And also, not every single service was identified. So you might get a plumber on there, but they might come out and do a gas versus sort of your domestic toilet stuff, but the pricing is different. So depending on what price they put in, they may have missed that stuff. So we essentially get price on contact.
Thanks, Chris. Councillors? Councillor Cardew?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation to extend this contract. I think it doesn't give our locals, all of the locals, the opportunity to do any of our work at any given time during the year. I think it's onerous. I think that any information that we need from contractors, once it's given, it should be on file anyway, so we should be able to utilise that information whenever. So I just think it's onerous. I don't think we need it. There's a number of contractors on that list, I believe, not local contractors. So again, and from the information I received from Chris last night in an email, is that once we do this, you can't get back on it unless it's re-tendered. So it limits the ability for other locals to go on it, or new locals coming into the area, or new locals starting up business. So it's just too onerous, I believe. So I propose to move an alternative motion to not extend the contract.
Councillor Clifton?
I support the approach of Councillor Cardew. The existing list is 2 years old already. If we extend it for another year, that's 3 years. Business changes so rapidly in this modern world that we stand the chance of excluding emerging businesses, local businesses, from having to go in this manner. That's the last thing I believe we should be doing. We should be giving everyone the opportunity to have a go. So I agree with Councillor Cardew. I don't think that it should impose too much of a special workload against staff, because many of these documents are already on file. They would need to be updated regularly anyway, and any new and incoming suppliers could be easily asked. Their information could be provided and held again on file.
Sorry, through the chair, if I may. Just to clarify, it's not the only purchasing mechanism we have for any services, so it's just one of many. You can go outside of this. I wouldn't even say outside, it's probably the wrong term. You don't have to use a pre-qual supplier at any time of engagement. So given the current procurement policy in place, my staff, for example, tend to use a quoting process for those locals first and foremost, and then if we're struggling to get supply, we'll go to this pre-qualified list, because they are out of the region, some of them, but the documents are already in place. So I just wanted to clarify, it's not the only purchasing mechanism, and it doesn't stop anyone winning jobs with us.
I think the CEO wanted to
just that we need to maintain operational efficiencies as well. I think Chris has just covered that. If we can't find a local person to do it, we've got our 3 quotes, and then we go and look at this list. But really a matter for council, it's just one of a number of purchasing arrangements that we have, and you need to be mindful. Also, I appreciate that we can have things on file. If they're collected here under one contract, then we know that they've been reviewed, and we don't have to constantly go back. And I imagine they get periodic reminders to the insurance certificates and so forth are due, so it gives us a mechanism to do that, as opposed to having to ask each person each time, do you still have this insurance?
Councillor Clifton, and then Councillor Hayden.
Through the Mayor, to you, CEO, are we able to admit people into this contract now?
No.
No, so that, I know that doesn't preclude our staff from going to them and asking them for quotes.
Correct.
But is it possible to revise the system to have an ability to bring people into the contract at their request?
I'd have to take advice about that. Councillor have.
So through the chair, so obviously when we initially tendered for this pre-qualified suppliers list, we did not include a condition that allowed that to happen. So under this arrangement, we cannot do that. If we would go out and tender for a new arrangement, we could always introduce a clause that allows that to happen throughout the period of the tender or the arrangement. But with the current arrangement, that's not possible, and we can't retrospectively amend this current arrangement because that is what people tendered for at the time.
So we'll just go to Councillor Hayden.
So instead of ignore this, why cannot the council call for the tenders on service of list of pre-qualified suppliers again now? Because I actually know some of the regos and insurances aren't really checked that well anyway on some of these lists, and why could we not put it out to tender again?
Yeah, through the chair, that's exactly another alternative to this. So this is to transition you while that tender process goes on to sort of limit council's risks in that gap, because obviously we're out of tender for 3 weeks. Contract would have expired by then. You don't have to do it that way, but we can get the process going to run the tender and just get a new list and off we go.
Councillor Hodge.
Yes, I'll be supporting Councillor Clifton and Councillor Cardew in this regards, because I think we need to firm up our procurement policy a little bit more. I'm not quite sure it's working the way it should be, so we just need to do a bit more work on that. And I think another thing is as well, look, I know everyone's been under the pump the last 12 months, but really we shouldn't have this coming to council saying, listen, the contract ends today, we need to get this fixed for another 12 months. I know we've all been under the pump, everyone's been busy, but I just like to forward you that we shouldn't.
That's noted.
Thank you.
We just don't want to remove this type of purchasing arrangement in its entirety. That's all. So if we don't extend this contract now, our advice will still be that this is a good way to manage this type of work, and we would still like to go to tender again, including, as the General Manager has said, the opportunity for businesses to approach us, and we can put in a communication plan around that we do periodically. My memory doesn't go back far enough, but arrangements like this where I've worked in the past, I think that's what we did. Once every quarter we would invite, remind businesses that they could apply to be part of this contract, and we would suggest that as a better approach than eliminating operational efficiencies by not having contracts.
So would you be suggesting that instead of, I don't know how we can do that because of the, or you can let me know, the contract says it has to be a 12-month extension?
Through the chair, up to?
Up to, right, okay. So we could say, we could keep this in place for the next 3 months and then work on the new contract and rework it.
Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, thanks. Look, the recommendation is to award a 12-month extension of the contract, and from what we've been hearing, I won't be supporting that. And given the CEO's comments, I agree with what he says. So I still intend to move the alternate motion to not renew this contract, and then perhaps we could workshop this and give time to the officers to put forward another report to council where we can re-engage this sort of thing at a later date.
Yeah, just through the chair, Councillor Cardew, we could essentially have that workshop and run the tender process. probably don't need to come to council. We can do without on the award if you like. Probably the most streamlined way to do it.
Because what I really want to see happen is that it really needs to be built so that if we have new local contractors coming into the area, that they can afford to be put on. There's a mechanism in place for them to go onto the list if they want to be on that list. Yeah. So at the moment, as it stands, I won't be supporting it. I'll be losing to not to endorse it. So and then give the officers the opportunity to come back with a different proposal.
Yeah, so what we need is more agility, Kev. It's locked in. It's too rigid. It's locked in. That's all we want is agility.
I agree with that, Mr. Mayor. I'm not, in speaking to with Councillor Cardew, I'm not against the idea of having these proposals at all. I would expect that if we vote to remove this at this meeting, I would expect that even as early as the next meeting, there would be a more agile process available for us to endorse. Now, I'm not against the idea of having these devices. I just think the Mayor's word is agile. I agree with that.
Through the chair,
that's a new one, Councillor Clifton.
Okay. That's yes, Mr. CEO. It's a new one. I'm learning.
Need to get a board or something so we can put ticks up there.
Just through the chair, it's worth noting that you know, a lot of councils in the last 2 years have investigated a lot of time into this type of procure because it's been challenging for councils, and even the likes of Vendor Panel, for example, have got on board trying to understand a good arrangement for councils rather than this really locked in rigid contract. So yeah, I'll learn a bit in the next couple of weeks too on that.
Yeah, I think the ROC does some things well, and purchasing and coming up with guidance for us around purchasing is one of those things. I almost said the wrong thing.
Councillor Cardew.
Mayor, can I move a motion, an alternative motion there?
Councillor Cardew can move an alternative motion.
I'd like to move that council does not award a 12-month extension to the contract TRC 2019/9 trade services list of pre-qualified suppliers.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Clifton seconding Councillor Cardew's motion. Those in favour?
Oh, excuse me. Can we discuss that? Or?
We can discuss it, Councillor Hodge.
Okay. I'd really like to go to CEO. Are you happy with this?
Yeah, fine. When the contract would have ended, we'd have to go back to doing what we're doing. Right. So we're fine. We'll get some new tenders that allow us the flexibility. We've listened and heard what you're asking for, and which is for new entrants into the region to be able to join contracts that are in place, or contracts of this nature that we may have in place. So we'll provide you with a report. Won't commit to the next meeting, but we'll target the next meeting to have that report and some contract terms so that the arrangement can be reactivated and everyone locally can have a fair opportunity to be part of that contract. I do just want to reiterate, we don't use it as a rigid tool. I think the manager's already said that we go first and foremost to locals for this type of work. In the event that we can't find someone to do it, then we look to potentially to this contract and people who may be outside the region on this contract. So I just want to reiterate that's the way that we've been doing it in practice. And also we'll look at our processes and see how we might track our spend against contracts of this nature. We've been, I haven't been here, so correct me if I'm wrong, or the General Manager, but we may not have had mechanisms to track expenditure against these particular contracts against it.
Through the chair, I think we do have a mechanism to track expenditure. Yeah, because whenever we make a purchase order against this contractual arrangement,
it does keep
it's linked to that contractual arrangement, so we usually provide an overview of
what is spent. So we might just when we're reviewing and revising our reporting against contracts in general, we can perhaps include a tracking of expenditure against this contract. Shouldn't be overly difficult. Thank you.
Through the chair, sort of twofold as well. The contract's pre-qual, local or not local as well, so we can ascertain that split too. So.
Councillor.
Through the chair, is it is it required that we put up an alternate motion, or do we just not accept the, excuse me, not accept the officer's recommendation?
If you just don't vote on it, then the contract ends. In essence, it's not usual to vote to not do something, but I did discuss that with the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor this morning, but just to close it out, if we have something on the record that says it wasn't extended, then it just closes this and doesn't leave it floating there. And perhaps readers of our minutes and agendas wondering what became of it. You haven't told in, it just looks like it sits there and
yeah, and through the chair, I'll just notify all the contractors on there that we're going through a new process. They'd like to get the ball rolling. There's a lot of paperwork they've got to fill out and prepare themselves for, so I'll notify them that the process will be more quote related rather than if we were to engage them under this, because this is currently expired, so I'll just read them as well. So it's good to have something on the board to enable me to make that call.
Some local contractors don't want to work for the council. Just because they're local doesn't mean they want to work for council. And to me, I don't see a problem with having people from out of the shire or the region working, because it is what it is. I think you tell me you don't go to Cairns and shop at another shop. You don't. I just don't see there's a big problem with that. So yeah, I don't know why we.
Any other comments from any other councillors? We've got Councillor Cardew's alternative motion up on the board there. It's been moved by Councillor Cardew and seconded by Councillor Clifton. Those in favour? Okay, so that's carried. Would you like that recorded against him? Carried 5-1. Thank you. Item 12.5, Kirai toilet removal. Do we have a councillor who'd like to open this one for discussion? Councillor Wilts, seconder. Councillor Hodge. Councillor Wilts, would you like to talk about that?
Just one of the major aspects we wanted to do was to move forward with things, and I think that buildings like the old toilet out there are just decrepit. Well and truly seen their use by date, and there's a new toilet block within stone's throw, or Australian cricket ball, from the old toilet block to the new one, and yeah, I just happy to support.
Thanks, Councillor Wilts.
Recommendation.
Councillors, Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, so just as you see in the agenda, there's a lovely photo of the new and the existing. So just like to show that.
Can I show that to Councillor?
Yes,
Oh, thank you for that, yeah. I thought I was seeing double, Councillor, I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's good. Did you have your hand up yet? No. Councillor Clifton.
I'd just like to remind councillors that the question of the Kirai Park, the Kirai, the centre of Kirai, has been a vexing one for some time. The previous council moved to try and find an alternative use of that park. Our council, this current council, stopped people from camping in there. Since that time, there's been a number of community meetings that have endorsed that we should be doing something. The hotel has put in to take over, put a proposal in to consider alternative uses of the park. And so I wouldn't like to see this toilet knocked out just yet. I'd like to see it locked up and disabled, but there may be some, until another usage, until a clear usage of that area emerges, it could be, in which that could be considered as a minor asset. I don't think times is fundamentally important here. Getting it right is important. If we do, for example, decide to, in the long course of time, or sooner rather than later, allow people to park, to overnight camp in there, the last thing the community would want is for people who are camping there to use, this is what they've said, and perhaps being reasonable or unreasonable, draw your own conclusion, use the toilets across the way. They want to separate the kids and the adults. So it's been there for a long time now, and I wouldn't like to see it demolished at this stage. That's not to say I'd like to see some thought put into the future of the park first.
Thanks, Councillor Clifton. Councillors, any other discussion on this one? Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, in regards to Councillor Clifton's response, it may be a good idea, and I understand what he's saying. Maybe we can amend the officer's recommendation that it not be demolished until further notice.
Councillors, any other comments?
It's a bit open-ended, that
I do.
CEO?
Mr Mayor, I think we've built the new toilet on the basis that this one wasn't necessarily fit for purpose, and part of, and whilst this is not a massive building or a massive amount of dollars, we're trying to set a direction in relation to how we manage our assets. We made the decision previously that we would build a new toilet block and remove the one that's there, and where the one-off cost, whatever that might be on our operating statement or wherever, in relation to that building, and remove the depreciation in an ongoing way. And we're just looking for clarity, I suppose, and consistency in our decision-making around these types of assets.
Thanks, CEO. Councillor Carter.
Yeah, look, I take on board Councillor Clifton's comments, and I don't entirely disagree with them. But I also agree with what the CEO just said, and the fact of the matter is that if we allow this one to remain, there'll be 3 public toilet blocks within 100 metres of themselves. There's another public toilet block 100 metres up the road in the cricket field, in the sporting oval up there. So I just think, even though we don't know the direction of the park in front of the pub, but I think in line with what the CEO said, we have made conscious decisions to try and manage our obsolete and ageing assets, and we have to make some hard decisions, and I think this is probably going to be the first one, or one of many. I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillors, do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Wills, a seconder. Councillor Hayden. Those in favour? Okay, so it's 5-2. Would you like yours counted against, Councillor Clifton?
Yes, please.
Yes, Councillor Hodge? Yes. Yeah, so if you can record those 2 against, please, Jackie.
I think it's a nice bit of render going.
You seconded that. What do we do? No,
Two of the work you've been doing it.
Mr Mayor, just if I may, where do we got a building like this that we're going to now demolish? It's got a plaque on it. Is there a process for decommissioning the plaque?
Good question, Councillor Clifton. I forgot about that. I'll take advice.
Look, we'll take your question on that as Councillor Clifton, and do what we can to ensure that the plaque is preserved and placed in a suitable location.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Councillor Clifton. Yeah,
other than the boot of the CEO's chief or something. I know we will. I'm not sure. We did make mention that earlier in the week that there is a few plaques collected in a place, and perhaps that's subject to another small strategy or policy or procedure that we should have as to what we do intend to do and where we do intend to display them. Again, I'm not giving that any priority at this point in time.
Thanks very much. Well, look, councillors, it's it's 10 o'clock. We might take a 10-minute break if we need to do a bathroom stop or get a tea or coffee. We'll just break for 10 minutes if that's okay. Thank you.
Are we offline, Jack?
You lost that one, Dave?
We are.
All good?
Yep, all live.
Thank you, thanks Jackie. All right, we'll resume the meeting at 10:18. We're up to item 13.1, which is the finance report, May 2021. Could we have perhaps a mover of the report? Anyone like to move the report? Councillor Hodge. A seconder of the report? Councillor Wills. Thank you. And we may go to Erica first. If you'd like to talk to it briefly, Erica, that'd be good.
Absolutely. So the finance report, this is for the end of May. So the activities that are underway at the moment are well and truly focused on finalising the financial year. We continue to be very, very close to budget, and we expect to be that as we get to 30 June. We have received the financial assistance grant, an early component of that payment for the following year, but we had budgeted for that, so that has shown our revenue now is very, very close to our expectations at this point in time, or to the end of May. I have adjusted based on last conversations at the last meeting, the sale of land detail, and that's on page 92 of your report. Just try to, same detail, just presented a little bit differently. So hoping that makes a little bit more sense. So essentially itemises the property sales, so the money that we've made from those sales, and then minus any expenses that we incur for those related activities, just to try and make that a little bit clearer. That's probably the highlights for the month, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those on board.
Councillors, any questions? Councillor Billman.
Through the chair, Erica, just a bit of an update. I note 2 blocks at Charles Street, Malanda, haven't hit the accounts yet. They're still to come through.
So their settlement date was actually early June, so they'll be in a couple of months. And yep. I did actually note that. So for the month of May, additional properties were under contract, yep. But with settlement date not yet reached, they'll be financially reflected in the June result.
Yeah, thanks, Erica, for clarifying.
Councillors, Councillor Clifton.
Jumping forward a bit, I wonder if we may have an update on the at-risk capital projects. As to where because we're just sort of days from the end, and this is a couple of weeks old. Things advance quickly this time of the year, so.
So through the chair, the at-risk projects that were included in the report for, I think that's the May report, are still the same. We're still working hard to deliver all projects in accordance with the commentary provided in that report, and there's no significant change to what is listed in that report at this point in time.
Thank you.
Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, it's just one of the projects. Could give us an update, if you don't mind, on just saw a photo of it. So the swimming pool, please. It looks very, very nice.
Yeah, you're willing to find it up, please.
Through the chair, Councillor Hodge. It's marked at risk because it's coming down to the last day, but it's all on track. We're waiting on the electronic blinds to be put up, and then we should receive PC in the next couple of days. So expect it to be done, and if it's not, the invoice is not received, we'll be accruing it all anyway because it's physically done on the ground. So they laid turf yesterday, which is usually the sign the project's nearly all done, and went up there and had an inspection. So very comfortable that it will be done before 30 June. And the pool managers have been in contact with us to start getting the pool up to temperature and the filter ready to go, so we can actually open it on the day and not just have a structure with a pool that's not ready to be swimming. So you should be right.
Very good. That's really good news. Congratulations. It's come on time, and as from the photos, it looks really, really good. Well, to the only other one is that our other favourite is how are we going with the pound?
I'll swap it.
Good morning, councillors.
Thanks for your leave.
Through the chair. So, councillors, I've been providing weekly updates on the pound.
As you're aware, right from the beginning, this project has had very, very tight timelines, and due to the inclement weather, I did have to ask for a 1 month request to extend, out till the end of July. We are still on track for the pound component. We are having difficulties in terms of the animal management compound exercise yard, so that is a lot of work that has to be done then and there, so that should start in the next week or so. And we also are having some issues around making sure that we're compliant in terms of disposal of the waste material.
Very good. How is the occupancy rate of our residents?
At the moment, yesterday it was at half capacity. So,
You're at Corinna meeting again.
and they were all dogs. Just no cats.
It's one of the few accommodation facilities where your target is 0
Yes.
occupancy rate.
Because they don't pay, do they?
Yeah, through the chair. Are you able to give us an idea of what the additional funds required are going to be?
Yeah, so outside of the $450,000, I have sought funding, external funding through the Works for Queensland for through the savings that have been achieved through the signage strategy. The fencing complex for the exercise yard will come close to $40,000, and that's to meet compliance. So,
and then the wastewater.
Potentially there will be further costs on that. I can't give you that figure yet. I don't know what it is. We're having that investigated now.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Kaji. Shirley, look, I've got to ask the question, and the pound building and it's just been an ongoing drama ever since conception. In the, like the email that came in the other night saying you need more money for waste and fencing and things, should that not have all been done in the conceptual design at the very beginning, so we know what all these costs are going to be? I mean, that just for effluent disposal would be a fundamental part of the design, I would have thought. Fencing, I would have thought, was a fundamental part of the design. I mean, to me, and people in the community looking at what's happening with this pound, it's painting a bad picture for council.
Yeah, so through the chair, council, when the pound was brought to council initially for funding, I believe it was bought as a $1.2 million contract or project. During the Works for Queensland funding, council made a conscious decision to reduce that funding down to $450,000, and we had literally 7 months to deliver that project from the time that we were told that we had $450,000. So what we did was we had to scale back the project considerably. In actual fact, we had to redesign the whole pound, given that there was such a substantial reduction in the budget. And that also included looking at the site. So we had to find as many savings as we could. And we did that in the month of December and January. And we did work with consultants to do that. It has been an absolutely rushed project. The planning behind it hasn't been great. Absolutely take that on board. But we also had a timeline to meet of 30 June to meet the funding allocation requirements. So absolutely take on board what you're saying, and we do need to plan better. Yeah, I really can't even comment any more than that.
No, I think it's been discussed previously, I think, Mr Mayor and Deputy Mayor, that some of our projects haven't gone as well as they might, but we're learning from that and we've put mechanisms in place to take those learnings forward, and particularly the scheduling of our work is something that we'll be paying particular attention to as part of this budget. But I think the manager's just outlined the circumstances were such in this project that the lead times were compressed, and in the course of compressing those lead times, we've pretty much started our project as from day one, because we've compressed our planning time. So getting things planned early and knowing what we're doing and what we're going to spend is critical. So once we get past next Wednesday, our real hard work, other than Erica's hard work, will commence with the team to ensure that we fully understand and communicate to you and to the community when projects start and when projects end at targets, and then we will advise you along the way if we have circumstances such as this. If we get our project management to where we want it to be, then we'll be able to tell you that we need to extend this time for a fortnight or a month or whatever it is, and why. So we'll continue to improve the matrix that you see there, where we mention at risk, and we'll be at risk in terms of our schedule or at risk in terms of our budget, or both. Improve our management of that and our reporting around that.
If I, through the chair, could just add also, regarding this particular project, I think that this situation that we're in, this was understood at the start. Council has received a report already regarding the early stages and how it got to where it was and the impact of those decisions around changes in funding. So that has already been addressed and discussed. I think also the outstanding work that has been done by officers, despite all of those things, to actually still be in a situation where we have a pound and we will deliver a pound with a significantly reduced amount of money to do what is required. I think that also requires some recognition. So I've heard the other matters that have already been raised, but I think there is also a need for that recognition of the officers and the work that they've done to actually get to where it is.
Councillor Hodge.
Yes, look, I understand that and I appreciate that. And I think it's going forward now. Ourselves as a council, that includes councillors and staff, is that we need to know going forward what projects that we want, and we can have them shovel ready. So because what tends to happen is lots of times the government says, you know, here's $500,000, here's $1 million, we want to spend in 2 months' time, you know. So we need to have our projects that we want planned and have them shovel ready with design and all that sort of stuff. So we're ready to go.
Completely agreed, and it'll be a large part of getting our project management right is understanding the directions that you take and what projects that you see supporting the direction that you take, and we can have them. So there's a lot of work to be done in the next few months around you know, our 10-year plan and what that looks like and what projects underpin that and what we're comfortable that we have enough information about and where we need more information. And I think it's frequently the smaller projects, discounting the pound as a smaller project, but it's not $5 million worth of water infrastructure. So those sort of smaller projects are where we have a tendency to accumulate more risk, and something that we will also continue to work at is when we do these things that when we started the project and when we scaled it back, we would ordinarily identify some amount around risk. So if it was a private contractor, you write some of those things in as risks and you put dollars around them, and if they're realised, they're realised. And we communicate that back, and that's again part of our growth in this space, that we get, not that the risks weren't identified, but we get better at assigning dollars to what those risks look like. And so I've mentioned many times that when we go over times that we understand the implications and the costs of going over time on our projects as well. It's part of what I bring to the table and part of why I'm here.
Thank you. Councillors? Councillor Cartridge.
Yeah, I've got some more finance questions if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Just note in the local spend, the percentage is around 56%, which is very pleasing. I did have some questions in relation to some of the pressures we've got. With regards to end fire engineering, fire services, there's we seem to be spending a lot of money with fire services for Mount Garnet Water Treatment Plant, Youngaborough Transfer Station. I mean, Mr. General Manager for Infrastructure, are you able to give us a bit of an overview why we need fire services at these locations?
So, thank you, through the chair. Obviously, if we have facilities that require systems to be able to fight or suppress fire, those systems need to be compliant and they need to be tested and maintained in accordance with relevant regulation, and that costs money, and that's reflected in the in this expenditure sheet.
What sort of systems, Mark? Can you give us an example?
Well, just simple things like fire extinguishers and things like that. They need to be tested. They need to be certified. If we look at wastewater treatment and water treatment sites, switch rooms might have suppression systems that if there's a switchboard fire, then it basically automatically extinguishes. Things like that. Fire safety panels in our main offices, they need to be maintained and checked and ensure that they're compliant, so we don't kill half of our staff in a fire, things like that.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Probably another one for you, Mark. I notice there's expenditure here for finding in Queensland for crusher dust. I mean, we've got, I don't know how many different crushing plants are in the place. Why have we got to go outside the show and buy crusher dust?
Well, so that's the funny thing about this report is that it identifies where the bill gets sent to for our purchases. As you might be aware, we do actually have a plant from Pioneer in Malanda in the industrial estate, and I would strongly suggest that we purchase our crusher dust from that plant. So we've actually purchased it locally, but the bill gets sent outside of our shire, and that's why it's reflected in the report.
So if I could, through the chair, just confirming that. So the details of the report, the address that we have on record is their head office or their accounts payable office, which can be, we might have local shop fronts, but their head office or their accounts payable section can be elsewhere. But the data that we have on record is actually the accounts payable
billing office.
The billing office, yeah. Correct. Now, if we could just highlight on page 99, I've also made a note this month. So for the month of May, $655,633 of the interstate and the intrastate expenditure relates to council endorsed projects as well. So they're through contracts and things that have come through council for endorsement. They make up the dollars that are associated in the column as well. So a large portion of that has been endorsed through council and is through local supplier.
Thank you. Thanks, Erica. Councillor Clifton.
I think it's, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think it's on page 102, and it's really an explanation of it. There's an item for Ethos Urban provided $90,000. I assume, Mark, that's part of our contractual arrangements with the Queensland Government, or?
Through the chair, again, thank you for that question. As you might be aware, we had an operational plan item to review our local government infrastructure planning arrangements, or LGIP, which basically supports the schedule of works that are trunk infrastructure works that are needed in light of development, and that supports our infrastructure charges model in the future. So this is a review of the local government infrastructure plan, for which we engaged Ethos through a quotation process. So that's there's no local supplier that provides those services.
Councillor Hodge.
Yes, just one more. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a general comment. I noticed about 2 weeks ago, actually in the King's Post and in the Tablelands, that the Douglas Shire won the LGAQ award for their initiatives from actually going from the cloud back to servers. So they're actually going away from the cloud bringing all their data back into the services. So I just want to flag that it'd be interesting to find out that information about our modernisation, whether it's relevant to us or not. But
probably not quite related to the finance report at the moment, Peter, but I understand your point. It's perhaps a matter for a later discussion. Yeah, Councillor Clifton.
I just had, on page 107, Woodburn Electrical work at the Atherton tennis court, 94,600. Is that the end of it? Or are we expecting more?
It's been 56.
Through the Chair, thanks Councillor Clifton. Essentially, yes, the capital works should be complete actually today. The last thing to do was just paint the court where we cut in. There's been some minor requests through the club just recently to put some garden beds back that were removed, but I've said to them we'll have a chat about that on site because essentially not part of the capital program anyway, we wouldn't do that as part of capital work. So that's the only conversation I'm to have with the President, but we'll do that on site after we give them back the site essentially. So in a nutshell, yes, and you may also be worth noting that was the extent of the whole work. So that was from the road all the way through to the toilet blocks and underground services. And you don't know until you start digging what you're going to find underground. So we've made some improvements to switchboards and things like that along the way, which was part of our electrical budget anyhow. So standard works for us.
Thank you.
Councillors, are we satisfied on this one? We've got Councillor Hodge has moved the officer's recommendation, Councillor Wilkes has seconded. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 13.2, Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting 2nd of June. Do we have a mover for the officer's report? Councillor Clifton. Seconder. Councillor Hodge. Councillor Clifton, would you like to talk to that?
A fairly simple and straightforward committee meeting that we had a little bit of time ago. These are unconfirmed minutes. The only thing that came out of it is a motion that's going to be put forward later today by Councillor Hodge, and perhaps he might talk to that. It relates to, in our minutes, it relates on page 120 to item 9, the procurement contract's $200,000. So, would you like ask you to speak to that, Councillor Hodge, with respect, or will you save your discussion for?
We might save that till later on, Councillor Clifton, just in terms of being concise.
There's only one other thing, is that item 7 in that report, in the minutes of the, since this time I've put forward for consideration 2 elements for internal audit review. One is our people and culture, human resources area, and the second one is our asset management. Particularly with asset management, councillors may recall that last year the Queensland Auditor General identified that our asset management performance had deteriorated one step, so it seems proper to have an internal review emphasis on it. Gotcha.
Very good. Thanks, Councillor Clifton. We have a mover and seconder, councillors, on this one. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 13.3, Environmental Protection Regulation 2019, Delegation of Statutory Powers. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Billman. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hayden. Thank you. Councillor Billman, would you like to talk to that?
Again, this report has enough detail contained within.
Councillors, anyone else like to talk to this one? Or ask for advice? No? Councillor
Well,
Hodge?
probably just from the General Manager, just to give us a bit of an update on, really is about reporting the issues of the delegations, the environmental relevant activities.
Sorry, through the chair. Sorry, I'm not sure what the question.
Okay, what's the main focus of the delegation taken from council to you guys? What's the main focus of it?
So, I guess in a general sense, legislation provides the rules, and then council delegates the power to the CEO, who can then sub-delegate that power to officers to actually undertake the activities. Otherwise, council, everything would have to come to council for a decision. So the purpose of the delegations is to formally give the power to the council, to the CEO, to then share that with officers, so that we can go about the business of council, and it doesn't require every decision to come here.
Thank you. Okay. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried. Thank you. Item 13.4, Risk Appetite Statement Report. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hodge? Councillor Wilkes? Councillor Hodge?
Yep. Just like to go to Phil now, just to give us explain roughly to us councillors how risk is the categories from 0 to high, if you want to put it that way, where low is low and 0.
So yeah, thanks council, through the chair. As council will recall, we conducted a couple of workshops earlier this year, late last year and earlier this year, around council's risk appetite statement. Its risk appetite statement basically guides the amount of risk, I suppose, council wants to take on in various categories. So we'll use this document as a guide when we're reviewing our corporate risk register as to what an acceptable level of residual risk is. So when we apply our risk controls, this document helps inform that review. Now that we've got this risk appetite statement that council's workshopped and provided it's adopted today, we'll use this to guide the review, and we'll have further workshops around our corporate risk register, and which will help set our acceptable residual risk and guide any risk controls that we need to work on, policies, procedures, or controls. And so there's various controls that we'll have in place that will be considered. So this, it's fairly straightforward. It breaks it down into a number of different risk categories, and so when we actually talk specific risks that are recorded in our register, they'll fit into these general categories of, you know, things like governance and reputation risk, compliance, financial risks, and those sorts of things.
Thank you. Very good. Thanks, Phil. Councillor Clifton.
I know we, in our, thanks through the mayor, through the chair, Phil, in our meeting papers, we always have an assessment at the back of risk of each document. And I noticed some of them are saying, as referred to in the document, or some of them are not done at all. And I'm wondering, is there a process where you determine the risk of each of the things that are being put up to us, and or how it's determined? And I'm wondering whether that area of council papers might, now we have this, if it gets through, whether it might say this is deemed to be a high risk or a low risk or a medium risk, in exactly the same way as is there a financial implication? Yes, you know, $50,000 risk high. Do we intend to complete that process?
Yeah, so thanks Through the chair, thanks councillor. So when we're looking at corporate risk framework, which we have, which guides, I guess, risk in everything we do, decision making that we do, that element of our council reports is generally reflective of council's corporate risk register, and you know, ultimately things like the appetite statement will guide that assessment. At this stage, I guess, in terms of council's risk maturity, the reason it's probably completed at various degrees is because some things are fairly perfunctory, that don't actually require a lot of you know, relevance to risk and that sort of thing. Other matters, the whole report will be centred around pros and cons and risks that might be inherent to that particular matter. So we can certainly look at putting some more structure around that component of the reports as the organisation matures in that risk space. But essentially what that section of the council reports does is turns council's mind to the various risk categories that we have recorded in our corporate risk register, and hopefully with time those sorts of things will improve as we have more input to the registers and to the things like the risk appetite statement. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thanks very much. All right, councillors, we have a mover and a seconder on the officer's recommendation. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 13.5, Social Housing Quarterly Report. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hodge. A seconder? Councillor Bilney. Councillor Hodge, would you like to talk to that, or?
Very briefly, this has been an ongoing discussion since we've come to, since we've been elected. Basically, it is quite complex, and we'll just look forward going forward how we can come to a resolution on this going forward. So, I don't want to say any more things.
Thank you. Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, Phil. So basically what you say in this report that it is complex, like you've indicated, when we sort of realise that's trying to relinquish our social housing back to the state. And you're saying there that because of the size or the complexity of it, you need more resources to throw at it. And so you're saying that if we don't get any more resources, then it's not going to go anywhere because of the nature of work that's involved. We just don't have the capacity to do that. Is that right?
So yeah, through the chair, basically what we're trying to do is free up some capacity within the officers that are involved. So currently it's something that's I guess been born out of some ongoing operational issues. So how this sort of came about was looking at our ability to comply with contractual obligations under the national scheme. So we've been liaising with Department of Housing and Public Works for a number of years now about making sure that we can achieve compliance under the scheme requirements. So that's been done between facilities and legal and governance. We hold contracts with the tenancy arrangements, and facilities basically have typically undertaken the maintenance, and there's certain requirements around the standard of maintenance and the requirements of the actual dwellings. So how this, and I've included a bit of background. So council requested this report back in March this year as to what the status was. I guess going back to those discussions with the state, an immediate solution to this was to look at engaging a suitably qualified manager for that portfolio. So we had discussions with another local provider, which was Tablelands Housing Association, so that we could ensure that our compliance with managing the scheme in the short term could be achieved. So that was, I guess, the first step of the project that was born out of this. And then following that, there was a third component of the resolution. I think that was passed by the council just before this current council was elected. And that third component was that to request a report on the long-term options with the view of continuing to provide an ongoing quality service for the community. And that was centred around, or with the flavour of council looking at options to exit the scheme. And so in order to do that, exit of the scheme, like you pointed out, it is fairly complex. There's quite a lot of contracts that are associated with the 42 properties we've got with the state government, and we've got to go back and do some assessment of the financial inputs, because that really depends on what our liability is to exit the scheme. So we really need to have an understanding of what that looks like before we can put an offer to the state. So in terms of the resourcing, look, it's something that we're doing as a business as usual activity. It's just that with what's going on in the organisation, it's still sitting between our team and facilities. So it is something we're conscious of, and like I said, we're trying to free up capacity with our existing staff and resources. And so we are progressing it, but it's probably going fairly slowly, given there's quite a bit of work involved. So.
The other thing I noticed in the report there, I mean, I understand what you're saying about we're stuck with it at the moment. We need to apply resources to manage it in accordance with the contracts or the legislation, whatever. I understand that story. In order to relinquish all our social housing assets back to the state, we have to do a wedge of work to identify what's in contracts and who's paid for what and whatever else. So one of your comments in there was we put that back to the state, but they've come back to the council and said, you go first, basically.
Yeah, so
my question to you is, do you have the resources to put something very simple back to the state and let them challenge it? Or do you need more resources or more funding from council to get somebody, to get a contract or somebody in to do that work for you and give it back to the state, so that because this is costing council a lot of money, and in its current form. So if we budgeted for something, for some contractual, a figure to engage a contractor or consultant or something, in the long term it's going to be pretty beneficial financially to us to do that.
I think we'd appreciate just taking that, we appreciate your point of view, Deputy Mayor, but we might just take that on notice and provide a response around that rather than asking Phil to respond now. One of the things that we are aware of is that we have added in a significant number of projects to our, which we would call projects. This one might even be a reasonably significant project with some risk to council, into our business as usual processes, and find that business as usual is overrunning some of those, what you might refer to as soft projects, this type of work, which is not building anything, but it's stuff that we've got to get done to improve our future. So I'll take your question on notice, and one of the things that we will be doing as part of our planning for the next 12 months is looking at this type of work and whether we can, in fact, realistically ask existing staff to actually resource everything that we are seeking to do within a reasonable time frame. So it goes back again to our approach to project planning and what's reasonable, and our difficulties, I think, at times in forecasting what might amount to business as usual, including obviously it doesn't matter whether every time we add a table into a financial report, that takes time. It comes from somewhere. They don't just materialise. So we'll be having a close look at that and providing a view to council of the various projects that we are seeking to complete, which are not infrastructure projects, over the next 12 months, and keep you as informed about those projects, because they are critical at times, as we do about infrastructure projects.
Thank you. Thanks, CEO. Councillor Billney.
Yeah, just through the chair, just a comment noting the complexity, as Phil's stated. I recall reading something within the last 6 months or so that the Cairns Regional Council took something between 7 and 9 years to actually reverse their social housing issues. So obviously it's a slow burn.
Thanks, Councillor.
Experience is exactly the same thing that just a minute we thought we had finally resolved everything, and that was the day I went there, and I left 12 months later, and we still thought we had finally resolved everything, and that was the 8-year process to get over it. And less houses, significantly less houses.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, a little bit of levity. Not related only to the time frame. we have a disabled entry into the food works at Youngaborough now, and the mayor said that it took him 7 years, so in its 8th year it's done. So it may be possible everywhere else.
Well, the reality is, Councillor Clifton, it took me 7 years. It took you 1. You got it done in 1.
Thank you.
All right, very good. So we've got the officer's recommendation has been moved. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried. Thank you. Now, item 13.6, relocation of the Atherton Visitor Information Centre. Now, the situation here is, councillors, that some new important information has either just arrived or is about to arrive. So the plan on this report is that we defer it to the next. As soon as this information comes, we'll get it back to the next meeting if possible. CEO, do we need a motion to defer that?
That would be
yes.
Prudent, Mr Mayor, just that we defer it till the July meeting, and if we're not ready then we'll defer it to the August meeting.
Yes. Okay, so could we have a mover, Councillor Wills, and a seconder to defer, Councillor Clifton, to defer item 13.6 to a future meeting of council. Yeah, I think we'll just leave it at that. Those in favour of the motion to defer it to a future meeting? Carried. 13.7, signage strategy and plan. Could we have a mover to open the officer's report for discussion, please? Councillor Cardew, seconder. Councillor Hayden. Thank you. Councillor Cardew, would you like to talk to that?
Yeah, yes, thanks. Thanks, Mayor. I've had some fairly in-depth discussions just recently with senior officers and the CEO on this, because I had originally sought to not to support the officer's recommendation, but I've looked at it and through discussions with them, I still would like to, I'm going to propose an alternate motion, but with regards to the signage strategy implementation plan, to the effect that in phase 2, stage 1, I would like to see included in the towns that are going to get entry signs now, I'd like to see the towns of Mount Garnet and Walkerman be included in stage 1. For the simple reason that these two towns, in conjunction with Miller, the two towns that are directly, with the first two towns you see when you enter the local government area from those directions. So I think it's important for us, to have these towns, the town signages in place, because as a visitor to a local area, first impressions seem to be lasting impressions, and if you've got a nice little entry statement for the first town you see in the TRC area, I think that's going to make a statement. So I'm going to propose to put up an alternate motion to have Mount Garnet and Walkerman towns included in stage 1.
Is that, just a point of clarification, Councillor Cardew, is that an alternative motion or is that an additional motion to what's in the report?
Could I assist the Deputy Mayor? We've had extensive discussions around the recommendation, and except that Council would like to look at this on an annual basis rather than having that delegated at officer level, and we simply want, the Deputy Mayor simply seeks to add 2 signs to stage 1. Sorry, signage at 2 towns to stage 1.
So
We'll have to look at budgets and achievability, and we'll work at that at an operational level and provide some further reports once this, if this motion goes through.
So through the chair, could I just clarify, in terms of the CEO not having delegation, I just want to be clear, if a community group comes to council for a request for a sign, we need to bring that back to council? Is that what we're saying? For every sign, we're bringing that back to council?
Talking about the stage and implementation plan, so perhaps the delegation.
Sorry.
Let's deal with the town entry signs at this, and then perhaps we can have a conversation after this about what particular parts of the overall strategy action plan we see to have delegating energy, if that's not going to unduly disrupt anything that's in the pipeline at the moment.
No, that's fine.
And then we can just talk through that. So I think council wants to look at the town entry and that type of signage on an annual basis, rather than, I may have misunderstood the delegation there, but the feeling was that this is where we would, this may be the last time council looked at this, rather than strategy refers to an annual action plan. So anyway, we're having internal conversations sitting here, so I'll stop.
So I'm not completely sure. Councillor Cardew, is your proposed motion?
But could we, sorry Mr Mayor, but just if we could look at the implementation plan as it is in the document. Jackie, is it possible?
Is this phase 2, stage 1?
Phase 2, stage 1.
To include now.
We just want to bring, Deputy Mayor would like us to bring forward those 2 towns, and we'll look at how we might resource that. Understanding that the strategy's reasonably new and that we've had a couple of workshops about it, but we've got some thought processes along the way that are evolving, and there's been a significant amount of community consultation, and there's a lot of community time and officer time got us to get where we are, and we've seen some signs. The good news front, Mr Mayor, we've seen some signs going up in recent times, and they do look really good, and this is just a building on that through the next phase.
So through the chair, I'm comfortable with that. Absolutely.
And we put them all up tomorrow, Mr Mayor. Sleep the whole job if we had the money. So I still need some clarification.
So, Mr Mayor, my understanding is that we decide upon the amendment, and then we decide upon the whole of the motions. I'm getting it clarified as well.
So perhaps if I could just contribute here, I think that what we're talking about is not an alternate motion, but an amendment to the existing motion. And the amendment is that council does endorse the implementation plan with the change for those two towns. So I think the wording that we had as an alternate motion actually just needs to be an amendment to the existing motion.
Yeah, and in fact, it could I say it could be just dot point 3.
Exactly.
It could be just the third
or possibly
part.
just straight under part 1, because that talks to the
Under
implementation plan. So that would make sense for it to say implementation plan with the amendment of those towns being brought into stage 1.
Yeah, gotcha. So, CEO, does that make sense if Councillor Cardew's amendment slots in between 1 and 2 of the officer's recommendation? Does that work?
That's fine.
Yes.
I think.
That leaves the delegations.
And
I think it's probably worth just for clarity around what is existing part 2 and will become part 3, the extent of that delegation that's envisaged.
Through the chair, I'm happy to speak to that. Because this is a 5-year plan, we have community members coming to us on a regular basis, and that's actually how this plan was developed in the first place, is that community kept coming to us with requests for signage, but we didn't have a clear strategy around what we wanted to do, so hence we have the strategy now. Community, such as the Lions Group, not-for-profit groups, the chambers, they do like to put signs up, so we just need clarity when they're coming to council how we're to handle those. The delegation that I have, that I've put in the report, is for us to go to the CEO and get clarity for each sign that comes in. It meets the strategy, tick, it can go. Or alternatively, if we take that delegation out, then potentially what you're saying to the officers is that you want us to bring those signs back to you for approval. And that could be anything from 10 reports a year to 20 or 30. So they come in ad hocly, that's the problem with
Councillors,
community.
it's not my view that we want to remove the delegation. That's not my is that what you were seeking, Councillor Cardew?
Delegation, I just think, I don't know, I'm getting confused here about signs. I'm talking 10 entry signs, and you're talking any sign at all, whether it be an advertisement sign or the like. So, yeah, I just think.
So councillors, through the chair again, the plan is a 5-year plan, and what you're endorsing today is the 5-year plan, not just part 1 and stage 1. So we're looking for endorsement of the whole plan with the amendments of Mount Garnet and Walkerman. Further to that, what I'm also seeking is delegation through the CEO. So over the next 5 years, if there is a change or a minor change to a signage through a community group, that we can go ahead and do that we're not coming back to council with that change.
I wouldn't agree to that, through you, Mr Chair. If a community group wants to put a sign up, an entry sign or something like that, it's on a road reserve or whatever, no, I think it should come back to council, because in my view, I just don't want signs popping up anywhere. So at the end of the day, we're here to make decisions.
Councillor Clifton.
Through the chair, my view is that our regional council area promotional signs that we're responsible for putting up is quite a different matter to community signs. And I think that I wasn't aware, for example, when I read this, that you were talking about Lions Club signs and things of that nature as well. I think we need separate papers and separate issues. We can put signs up where we want to, but we've got to do it with respect to community consultation, etc. The issue of a Lions Club putting up, or a football club, or someone putting up something else up, is another matter altogether. And I think the issues should be separated. I don't think they should be lumped in together. I don't, thinking to the future, I don't want, as an elected member, to drive down the road and see a sign up without knowing that it was going to be put there. And I think that we've experienced in the last year or so decisions being made without councillors being aware of it. And I think, with all the best will in the world, I don't wish to say anything about goodwill or otherwise, and suddenly something happens and we don't know about it. I think if we separated these two issues and then decide the issue of delegation, I don't want to make it complex, but as it is now, anything could happen. There's ability for anything to happen, in my view. I don't like that.
Sure, Gwyneth.
Through the chair, I would think that community requests for signage would come through the community request process anyway, backed by the signage strategy. So my understanding is that those requests will come to council through that process. The reason that we suggested having delegation to the CEO was that our costings are very much estimates in the plan. It is only a plan that we're going to work towards, and we are aware that there are some other priorities other than the ones that we've identified in the next phase. And if we're able to make budget savings and include, for example, in Hot Springs or Tolga, which those of you who drive past those signs regularly will know they're not in the best of states, we would like to have the flexibility to come to the CEO and say we've got budget savings from that allocated grant of $10,000, and we think that's sufficient for us to address the issue of the problem of the sign in Hot Springs, for example. So it was still in relation to the rollout of the plan, but if we have some wiggle room and we can make budget savings, we can move ourselves further along the plan earlier on than anticipated. I think that's fair, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Just if I,
Councillor Hodge and then Councillor Hayden.
in regards to, I'm a bit of a, if there's savings somewhere, I don't think that we should just go and spend it. You know what I mean? If there's savings, we'll bank it. So, do you understand what I'm saying?
Sorry, through the chair, the funding we're talking about is the Works for Queensland funding, so we can't actually leave that, it has to be spent.
Councillor Hayden.
So mine's on a bit of a different vein. I just want to thank Shirley, Gwyneth and all the staff involved in this, with 2 years of consultation on the strategy and signage with councillors and officers, and the current councillors endorsing the Tablelands Regional Signage Strategy in October 2021, with also community supporting and guiding this process and the outcome today to get this outcome. Meetings were held throughout this region in different towns, allowing locals to have a say. This strategy and plan is tied to the state government funding as approval through our Works for Queensland projects. This one implication plan reflects direction of the endorsed Tablelands Regional Council's Interim Reconciliation Action Plan 2021, and we should be showing support for our Indigenous groups and the greater community. And I think, Cheryl, you read the report, I think you find that I'm sure we're not going to be putting signs up willy-nilly all over the Shire without someone looking at it. And
thanks, Councillor Hayden. Councillors? Last one to Councillor Hodge for you.
It's to do with stage two in regards to the Indigenous ones coming into the country. I just want to make sure that there is different groups, you know. And how do you, like, say, the Atherton, right?
So I can answer that, Councillor. So through the chair.
Thanks, Cheryl.
So through the chair, Councillor, the Tableland Regional Council enters into land use agreements, and they're determined by the federal government. And for each land use agreement, there's a prescribed body corp, so an overarching body that looks after that community or Indigenous community group. We will liaise with the prescribed body corp through our ILUAs, so through our land use agreements, with our 8 groups across the Tablelands. Okay. Yeah, so that's how we identify, and that's legally our obligation.
Just making sure that, you know, one group coming to us saying, why wasn't my name on it?
So,
you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely take on board what you're saying, Councillor. Through the chair, we will use the land use agreement, and they are a statutory document.
Councillor Cardew?
Yeah, thanks. Look, further everybody's comments, and I think it's a little bit more complex than what we originally, or what I originally thought anyway. And I take on board Councillor Clifton and Hodges' comments, and I tend to agree with them. I think I'd be happy at this point in time to have the delegation part 3 removed, and then this thing be brought back to us in the near future with clear direction of town empty signage as opposed to other signage, so that we can have a more informed discussion about it, because I'm not comfortable with the item 3 in the delegation.
Sorry, through the chair, so I understand clearly. If we have savings when we do this first stage, you would like us to come back before we move on to any other projects within that funding for approval?
I'm not talking finance or savings and things. I'm just talking about removing item 3 for the delegation to the CEO, and including in stage 1 the town signs for Mount Garnet and Walkman. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm talking about.
So through the chair, further to that, could I request, if we are going, if council's happy to, if there is savings within this budget, this Works for Queensland budget, we can move through and add more signs to to be completed within that budget timeframe, so we expend the full amount of the Works for Queensland money.
Would that be in line with your implementation plan?
Yes.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got the, all I'm saying is that in phase 2, stage 1, Mount Garnet and Walkham will be included, and that we delete the delegation provision at this point in time until we come back again, workshop and come back, and everything's more clear, whether it's town signage or other signage, whatever, we can move forward then. But at this point in time, and if you've got savings in these areas here, and you want to move on to stage 2, then I don't have a real drama with that.
Okay.
Because it's already in the plan. So, yeah.
Councillor Dillon.
Through the chair, I'm forming a bit of a different view. I don't see any problem with the delegation myself, and if there's a contentious issue or sign, I would have comfort in the CEO bringing it to council's, bring it to us to make a decision on it if it is a contentious issue. So I don't have a problem with the delegation.
Councillor Wills.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that we're over complicating things and we're just going in too far. We've got extremely competent officers that work within the organisation, and I think that we've got to put some real faith in the advice they're giving and the direction that they're giving us. And I just think we're overcomplicating it. If we take off number 3, we're just creating more work for already overworked staff.
Yeah, look, if I could add my 2 bobs worth, councillors, I was satisfied with Councillor Cardew's original amendment. I think we should, I think the idea of signage at Walkham and Mount Garnet is good, and we should do that. But I'm not comfortable with removing the delegation of the CEO, because at the end of the day, we need to entrust our officers to do the job. We need to entrust the CEO if there's anything that he's not comfortable with, that he can come to us at a caucus meeting and say, look, this is where we're at with our signage, this has come up, what do you think? I'm confident that'll happen, but to remove the delegation of the CEO, that is getting, we're creating more work for ourselves, and we don't want to be in here arguing about a road sign somewhere, so that council staff can do their job. So I'm certainly happy with Councillor Cardew's original amendment, but I'm not comfortable with deleting the delegation. I think we're creating a rod for our back, and it makes it very hard for officers to function. Councillor Hodge.
Just thank you for your view there. Let me just get it quite clear here. Phase 1 is 2021, which is almost complete, right? $100,000 for Works for Queensland. So we know about that. Sugar bag and Walker and so on. It's very, very good now. And stage 2, or phase 2, is 22-23, $340,000, right? All the signs that are in there, and with this resolution will be an inclusion of the other 2. I'm quite sure that'll fix 340,000. Quite sure. And then we go to phase 2, stage 2, which is 20. So this one goes from 21 to 24, okay? Which is the Indigenous sites.
Yep.
And we got 110,000 for that. And I'm quite sure that'll be taken up. So now phase 3 and 4 and 5, they're pending funding. There is no funding for it. So this is what I'm trying to get at. It needs, in my view, in those next phases, that's where you bring it back to council.
So through the chair, absolutely, that would come back to council. We would need to apply for funding to go and access and deliver that. Right. So before we actually can apply for funding, we need to get that approval from council as it stands now.
That's right. Yep. So what you're really saying is about if there is any savings, well, forget about stage 1, it's savings in stage 2. If there is, and I doubt it very much, right? basically, might as well leave it there.
Councillor Clifton.
The final comment I have to make is that I am personally completely committed to phase 2, stage 2. But if I were a citizen, but this is Queensland and North Queensland, where there is a difference of view still existing about these issues, which I'm sure everyone, I'm not talking out of school when I say that, and if I were possibly living in a township and Indigenous recognition was made for the area before my township was organised, I might feel out of kilter with that, and I think we have to bear that in mind. I personally don't like this implementation strategy for that particular reason. I don't want, from my point of view, supporting the First Nations people as I do and have worked with them for many, many years in my life before council. I also think that we have to be sensitive to the needs of people who live in the area already. I don't want that level of recognition over the country before we recognise the people who currently live in our little towns who have pioneered this area as well. So I don't like the strategy. I think there's a lot of talk. I like the strategy. There's elements of it I don't like. I think there's a lot to be had, a lot of discussion needs to be had yet about issues like that. And that's why I favour nothing against the CEO, nothing against the officers, taking it off the officers and taking off the CEO for the time being, and then having another discussion about it, and this council being conclusive about it. My last shot.
So, sorry, through the chair, Councillor, I take on board what you say. Just to be really clear, in terms of the community engagement that was done, it was carried out across the Tablelands, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. The plan has been developed off the back of the community engagement. So the plan's actually developed off the back of what communities asked us to do. So to change could reputationally, in terms of doing community engagement and then not following through on the community engagement for council, reputationally could be significant.
So just in addition to that, it's accurate to say that, just through you, Mr. Chairman, to the manager, it's accurate to say that the action plan is absolutely consistent with the strategy that we adopted in October. We adopted this strategy in October. We provided a plan now in accordance with that strategy, 6.1.1, to implement that strategy, as we rightly should do. And here we are wanting to fix the strategy that we adopted in October.
So, through the chair, I'd just like to note the RAP has already been endorsed as well, which directly feeds into this strategy.
That's not to say that we have any objection, whatever, with bringing forward some town signage. But it doesn't seem quite appropriate to go back and redo a strategy that's as new as October 2020.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Billman?
I'd like to move the motion as it's currently put up there as 1, endorse the TRC signage strategy implementation plan guide as noted in this report. 2, amend the signage implementation plan to include signage at the towns of Walkham and Mount Garnet in stage 1. And thirdly, delegate to the CEO the power to enter into further discussions with officers and make changes to the TRC signage strategy implementation plan over the following 5 years to respond to changing circumstances and funding opportunities.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Clifton, Councillor Billman, yeah. Councillor Wills. Anyone else like to talk to that? Those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
Item 14, notice of motion. Councillor Hodge.
Thank you. Okay, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the following resolution. That all variations to contracts and arrangements that are greater than 20% of the original contract value and have greater value than 5,000 or valued more than 10,000, and as well have an accumulated value greater than 50,000, be reported back to council as an addendum to the monthly financial report. We can change that a little bit if we, on the advice of the CEO about how the report comes. It can come as to the financial report, or we'll just leave it. We'll just see how it comes back. So the background of this is that from the Internal Audit and Risk Improvement Committee meeting and discussions with the internal audit, and following further discussions with her, this is why I've got the recommendation that's come from there. And basically it's to monitor, and if we have these variations coming to contracts and arrangements, why is it happening? So that's the bulk of it. It's a standard thing in most councils. So I'd like to move the...
Councillor Hodge is moving that motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Clifton is seconded. Anyone else like to talk to that? Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 15, business without notice. I'll hand over to Councillor Bilney. He has some matters he'd like to raise.
Through the chair, I've got two matters. The first one relates to the federal government recently announcing its intention to close the CSIRO or CSIRO facilities in Atherton, with staff scheduled to leave in November 2021 and the site potentially to close in June 2022. I feel it's considered prudent to forward a letter to the Minister seeking consideration to reverse his decision, as it will have an adverse effect on the Tablelands community. I also understand the other two tiers of government, being the state and federal, looking at doing the same. So my motion would be that council formally, and we've got formally correct in this instance, request the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology, Christian Porter, to reverse the decision to close CSIRO facilities and relocate staff from Atherton, as it will adversely affect the Atherton and Tablelands community.
Thanks, Councillor Bilney. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Bilney's motion? Councillor Wills, seconding. Anyone else like to talk to that? Councillor Hodge?
Just quickly, just with the resolution, just a technical thing here, seeing where council does, should we have his official name, like the Honourable Christian Porter MP put in that resolution? So it's sure his proper name is there.
Yep. Those in favour of the motion with Councillor Hodge's amendments to get the title right? Yep. Carried. Thanks, Councillor Bilney. And you had one other one.
Yeah. Secondly, you may or may not have noticed that I've had a friend sitting in the corner of the table here. It's a bush chook or a cassowary. Just like to make mention of the recent award provided to the Tableland Regional Council's Community Revegetation Nursery at the recent Cassowary Awards held by the Wet Tropics Management Authority. The award recognises the contributions of local government, infrastructure service providers and industry in the areas of sustainable land use planning and practices, natural resource management, infrastructure provision and public campaigns for the protection of the wet tropics World Heritage Area. The community revegetation nursery has gained a state, national and international reputation for the development and application of technologies for revegetation and restoration through extensive involvement in collaborative projects that develop and test novel habitat restoration techniques. It partners with ongoing projects with Griffith University, Department of Environment and Science, Terrain, Wet Tropics Management Authority. The nursery provides specialist, detailed technical advice regarding native habitat management and restoration to Tablelands residents, environmentalists and farmers. The dedication of staff and community volunteers has resulted in more than 940,000 trees being planted. This has created environmentally significant wildlife corridors that link isolated remnants of vegetation throughout the region. This prestigious award is a fantastic achievement for the Tablelands Regional Council and its Natural Resource Management and Community Revegetation Nursery officers, the staff and its volunteers. Thank you.
Thanks, and congratulations to those officers that have done a lot of work over many years. Thanks very much. Were you planning to?
I can hand over the chook to you, Mr. Mayor, if you like, or I can hand it over to the CEO.
I thought a bush chook was a turkey.
Well, in this case, it's scrub turkey. It probably
Yes.
It was fondly called a chook the other day when I was discussing this.
We can do that later,
Yes.
Councillor Bilney. Thank you. Thank you. Look, thanks very much, Councillor Bilney. I think we're ready to go into confidential. We'll just take a short adjournment. I'm just going to do a bathroom stop. We'll take a short adjournment, then we'll go into confidential.
I'll just take the camera out.
Thank you. We'll reconvene, Peter.
Did we have a mover and second to go into confidential?
Not yet.
Or they've just left the seat?
No, they have.
The media like this.
Yeah, we haven't done that
That's
yet. You right, Kerry? Yes. Yep. Okay, everyone, we'll reconvene. We've come to our confidential section. Can I have a mover and a seconder to go into confidential for items 16? Councillor Cardew, Councillor Hodge. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Okay, we're all good? Yep. All right. We shouldn't be.
We are now. Oh, hang on, just let me.
Yep,
give me 5
no
seconds.
worries. Yep.
Just quickly, do we have to
Corey.
Didn't want to have.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, item 16.1, Wagamay People Agreement and Consent Determination. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hayden, moving. Councillor Wilts, seconding. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Item 16.2, which is lease 8 on lot 553 NR 5363 Atherton Aerodrome. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Clifton, moving. A seconder, Councillor Wilts. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. And finally, item 16.3, lease 12 on lot 553, NR 5363, Atherton Aerodrome. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Wilts and Councillor Hayden? Yes? Yep. And Councillor Hayden seconding. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much. The next meeting is Thursday, 29th of July. Well, we do have a special meeting next week, don't we?
Promotion meeting on the 30th and then the next meeting 29th of July.
Yeah, so yeah, our next ordinary council meeting is the 29th of July. That will be in Ravenshoe, and we've got our budget meeting on the 30th of June, which is next week. That being all the business, councillors, I'll call the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next meeting is at 9:30?
No.
9:30 at the moment, so.
Yes, yeah, it's got, on here though, it's 9 o'clock on the 26th of August.
Yeah, that's a mistake.
Yeah, I gathered that. That might be where the 9 o'clock comes from though.
In the Tablelands, it's a 9 o'clock start.
Well, that'll be a bit.
The other location meetings is 9:30.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
You're not even involved in it.